The history of modern education encompasses a complex evolution influenced by social, cultural, economic, and philosophical changes. Here's a brief overview. 1. Industrial Revolution, 18th and 19th centuries. The rise of industrialization led to the need for a literate workforce, spurring the development of mass education systems in Europe and North America. Public education became more widespread to meet the demands of an industrialized economy. 2. The Enlightenment, 17th to 19th centuries. Philosophers like John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau advocated for educational reforms emphasizing reason, individualism, and the development of a well-rounded individual rather than rote memorization. 3. Compulsory education laws. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many countries enacted compulsory education laws, requiring children to attend school. This marked a shift towards universal education and increased literacy rates. 4. Progressive education movement, late 19th to early 20th centuries. Educators like John Dewey promoted a more child-centered, experiential learning approach, focusing on problem-solving and critical thinking rather than strict memorization. 5. Post-World War II era. After World War II, there was an increased emphasis on education as a means of economic and social progress. Many countries expanded their education systems to accommodate a growing demand for higher education and skilled labor. 6. Technological advancements. The late 20th and early 21st centuries saw the integration of technology into education, transforming teaching methods, access to information, and communication between educators and students. 7. Globalization and international education. Globalization led to increased focus on international education, exchange programs, and the sharing of educational practices and resources across borders. 8. Challenges and reforms. Modern education faces challenges such as inequality in access to quality education, debates over standardized testing, the role of technology in learning, and the need to adapt to a rapidly changing world with new skill requirements. The history of modern education reflects a continuous evolution shaped by societal needs, philosophical movements, technological advancements, and efforts to meet the demands of an ever-changing world. Ongoing discussions and reforms aim to address challenges while ensuring education remains relevant and accessible to all. Here's what critics of modern education system have to say about it. John Taylor Gatto, a former award-winning teacher turned critic, offered a scathing critique of the modern education system. His criticisms include: 1. Compulsory schooling. Gatto argued that compulsory schooling serves the interests of societal conformity and the industrial model of education, limiting individual freedom and creativity. He viewed the current system as inhibiting the natural learning process. 2. Standardization and conformity. He criticized the focus on standardized testing, arguing that it stifles creativity and critical thinking. Gatto believed that the emphasis on uniformity discourages individuality and diverse forms of intelligence. 3. Bureaucratic structure. Gatto condemned the bureaucratic nature of schools, suggesting that they function as a means of social control, conditioning students to follow rules and obey authority without questioning. 4. Segregation of learning. He criticized the compartmentalization of subjects and learning, arguing that it inhibits interdisciplinary thinking and fails to provide a holistic education. 5. Lack of real-life skills. Gatto argued that the education system fails to equip students with practical life skills and doesn't adequately prepare them for the challenges of the real world. 6. Overemphasis on credentialism. Gatto criticized the over-reliance on academic credentials, asserting that the system values diplomas and degrees over genuine learning and practical knowledge. Overall, Gatto's critique revolves around the idea that the modern education system stifles creativity, individuality, and critical thinking by emphasizing conformity, standardization, and bureaucratic control. He advocated for alternative educational approaches that foster creativity, individuality, and practical life skills, emphasizing the importance of self-directed learning and real-world experiences over institutionalized schooling. Sir Ken Robinson was a vocal critic of the modern education system, highlighting several key critiques. 1. Creativity and conformity. Robinson criticized the education system for stifling creativity and original thinking. He argued that schools prioritize conformity and standardization over nurturing individual talents and creativity, leading to a one-size-fits-all approach that limits diverse forms of intelligence. 2. Narrow definition of intelligence. He critiqued the system's focus on a limited definition of intelligence, primarily centered around academic and linguistic abilities. Robinson advocated for recognizing and valuing different types of intelligence, including artistic, kinesthetic, and creative abilities. 3. Lack of personalization. Robinson highlighted the lack of personalization in education, suggesting that the rigid structure and standardized curriculum fail to cater to individual strengths, interests, and learning styles. 4. Overemphasis on testing. He criticized the overemphasis on standardized testing and exam-focused education, arguing that it narrows the curriculum and leads to a culture of teaching to the test, neglecting broader aspects of learning. 5. Fixed hierarchy of subjects. Robinson argued against the hierarchy of subjects, where arts and creative disciplines are often considered less important than traditional academic subjects. He believed that arts and creativity are vital for holistic education. 6. Inability to adapt. Robinson highlighted the education system's failure to adapt to the rapidly changing needs of the 21st century world, where skills like creativity, innovation, adaptability, and collaboration are increasingly crucial. Robinson advocated for transformative changes in education that prioritize fostering creativity, individuality, and diverse talents, encouraging personalized learning experiences, and preparing students for the demands of a rapidly evolving world rather than a standardized, uniform approach to education. Alfie Kohn, a critic of the modern education system, offers several key critiques. 1. Overemphasis on rewards and grades. Kohn criticizes the prevalent use of grades, rewards, and punishments in education, arguing that they undermine intrinsic motivation and genuine learning. He suggests that focusing on external rewards undermines students' natural curiosity and love for learning. 2. Standardized testing. Kohn is critical of the reliance on standardized testing, which he believes narrows the curriculum and encourages rote memorization rather than fostering critical thinking, creativity, and deep understanding. 3. Competition and comparison. He critiques the pervasive culture of competition and comparison within schools, suggesting that it fosters a sense of inadequacy and anxiety in students instead of promoting collaboration and a supportive learning environment. 4. Lack of student autonomy. Kohn advocates for giving students more autonomy and control over their learning, arguing that the traditional top-down approach to education limits students' ability to explore their interests and take ownership of their learning experiences. 5. Homework practices. He challenges traditional homework practices, suggesting that excessive homework can be counterproductive, leading to stress and exhaustion rather than enhancing learning. 6. Focus on compliance over critical thinking. Kohn critiques the system for prioritizing compliance and obedience rather than nurturing critical thinking skills, independence, and questioning of authority. Overall, Kohn advocates for a shift towards a more student-centered, inquiry-based approach to education. He emphasizes the importance of intrinsic motivation, autonomy, collaboration, and a focus on deep understanding rather than surface-level performance indicators like grades and standardized test scores. Paulo Freire, a Brazilian educator and philosopher, offered a profound critique of the modern education system through his influential work Pedagogy of the Oppressed. His critiques include: 1. Banking concept of education. Freire criticized the traditional banking model of education, where teachers deposit information into passive students, treating them as empty vessels to be filled with knowledge. He argued that this approach dehumanizes learners, suppressing critical thinking and creativity. To oppression and dehumanization, he highlighted how the traditional education system perpetuates oppression by reinforcing hierarchical structures, where teachers hold authority over students, leading to the dehumanization of learners and a lack of autonomy in their education. 3. Lack of dialogue and critical consciousness. Freire advocated for dialogue-based education, emphasizing the importance of reciprocal learning between teachers and students. He believed that education should encourage critical consciousness, empowering students to critically analyze their social reality and actively participate in transforming it. 4. Teacher-student relationship. He critiqued the teacher-student relationship based on hierarchical power dynamics, advocating for a more egalitarian relationship that fosters mutual respect, collaboration, and a shared commitment to learning. 5. Praxis and empowerment. Freire emphasized the concept of praxis, combining reflection and action. He believed in an education that empowers individuals to critically reflect on their world and take informed action to transform it, rather than passively accepting the status quo. 6. Contextualized and relevant education. He argued for an education that is rooted in learners' experiences, cultures, and contexts, emphasizing the importance of relevance and meaningfulness in the learning process. Overall, Freire's critique aimed to challenge oppressive structures within education, advocating for a more liberating and empowering approach that values dialogue, critical thinking, and the active participation of learners in shaping their own education and societal transformation. Diane Ravitch, a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Education, has become a prominent critic of various aspects of the modern education system. Her critiques include: 1. Standardized testing and accountability measures. Ravitch criticizes the overemphasis on standardized testing and the use of test scores as the primary measure of student and school success. She argues that this focus narrows the curriculum and encourages teaching to the test, neglecting broader aspects of learning. 2. Market-driven reforms and privatization. She opposes market-driven education reforms and the push towards privatization through charter schools and voucher programs. Ravitch argues that these reforms divert resources away from public schools and exacerbate educational inequities. 3. Teacher evaluation and deprofessionalization. Ravitch critiques the reliance on high-stakes teacher evaluations based on student test scores, which she believes deprofessionalizes teachers and undermines their autonomy and creativity in the classroom. 4. Lack of support for public education. She criticizes policies that undermine public education by diverting funding to private ventures and charter schools, often at the expense of underfunded public schools. 5. Educational inequality and segregation. Ravitch highlights the persistent educational inequality and segregation, emphasizing the need to address systemic issues that perpetuate disparities based on race, socio-economic status, and geographic location. 6. Lack of research-based policies. She advocates for evidence-based policies in education, emphasizing the importance of research and informed decision-making in shaping effective educational practices and policies. Overall, Ravitch's critiques revolve around the need to prioritize equitable and well-supported public education, challenging market-driven reforms, over-reliance on standardized testing, and the neglect of broader educational goals beyond test scores. She advocates for policies that support teachers, address educational inequalities, and ensure a holistic approach to learning. The modern educasystem's emphasis on standardized testing and uniform curriculum often prioritizes memorization over critical thinking, fostering conformity rather than individuality. Rote learning takes precedence over deep comprehension, hindering the development of problem-solving skills and intellectual curiosity. Additionally, this approach suppresses creativity and innovation, discouraging students from exploring their unique interests. The detachment between classroom learning and practical application diminishes the relevance of education in students' lives. Moreover, the one-size-fits-all model disregards diverse learning styles, failing to accommodate individual strengths and weaknesses. Reliance on grades and external rewards can overshadow intrinsic motivation, and the system's neglect of non-academic skills further limits holistic development. Collectively, these factors contribute to an educational environment that stifles intellectual growth, creativity, and critical thinking, ultimately constraining students' potential for broader learning experiences.